Good over Jaspers, it's Requiem. Today we're going to have a look at the Junkers 88 C-6. So we've got a crew control to look at first. There's two other crew members, but you can only control the rear gunner here. So if you press T, you're going to pick up the gun on the right hand side first. Use the mouse to look around. Shift T goes over the iron sights and left mouse button will fire. If you want to swap to the other gun, you press Shift C. It'll switch over to the left, and you'll be in control of that gun. In this position you do have a couple other circuit breakers and things like that, but you can't really use them, so pressing Control C and that'll take us back to the pilot position. Now we do have another crew member on the right side, but that's not accessible. It's just you as the pilot and the gunner in the back, so we'll just go through the cockpit now instead. So starting at the back left, you got the manual fuel pumps there in brown. Forward of that's your fuel primer, and the red levers, those are your fuel valves. In front of that is your supercharge control. After stage 1, forward leaves it in automatic. And you've got your starters for the left and right engines. These knobs are the cowl shutters. Turning all the way to the left will close them, and all the way to the right will open them. Forward of that is going to be your propeller feathering control. There's the rudder trim, left and right. Then above that is going to be your aileron trim. And then above that's your elevator trim. Underneath this control are going to be the main engine controls. You got your RPM controls here for the left and right engines. And in between that's going to be your throttle control for the left and right engines as well. There's a gauge here with a few lights on it. This will tell you your flap and landing gear positions. So up top is your landing gear handle, and on the right is the flap handle. And there's two different ways to extend it. You're either going to extend it to the start position, which will indicate a yellow light for 25 degrees. If you go down again, that'll be landing at 50 degrees and show a green light. Well, the landing gear will show green being down and red retracted. The switch box on the left here have a few controls. There's a landing light up the top. Then your cockpit and instrument lighting underneath that one. And then under that's going to be your navigation lights. The front here is going to be your magnetos, along with an autopilot control switch and an on-off switch for that. So looking at the main panel, you got the AFN2 homing indicator. Next to that you have the course altimeter, airspeed indicator in kilometers per hour, altimeter in meters, magnetic compass along with a radio compass, fuel flow gauge, pitot heat indicator, vertical speed indicator, turn and bank indicator. Above that's going to be your course deviation indicator and an artificial horizon. Coming over to the right hand side of the front panel, you got a directional gyro with a slip indicator, repeater compass, the manifold pressure gauges for the left and right engines, along with the tachometers for the left and right engines, oil pressure and fuel pressure gauges, coolant temperature gauges for the left and right engines, an MGFF control unit which is for your cannons, the single engine autopilot control unit, and your propeller de-icing control. That's all we got for the main panel, other than the photo of course, so we'll come over to the right and have a look over there. Over on the right side here you have two oxygen quantity indicators, a fuel and lubricant indicator, and with a fuel and lubricant selector switch, another fuel and lubricant indicator here, and an outside air temperature gauge. Underneath that's your weapons control panel. So that'll pretty much do it for the interior. The last aspect to look at is outside on the engine itself. Here we have two gauges, oil temperature on the left and hydraulic pressure on the right. So now we'll look at starting the engine. It's pretty straightforward for us. All you have to do is push the RPM all the way forward to maximum, correct the throttle a little bit, and then press E to start the engine. And while it's going through that process, you can look at the pilot's notes for the Junkers 88 C-6. Alright, back in the cockpit now. So taxiing is going to be pretty easy. Just increase your throttle until you get enough thrust to break away from your static position. Then you can pull the thrust back a bit once you start moving. You can use the rudder to try and get some turning going, but it can be easier to use differential braking, or alternatively you can use differential thrust between the two engines if you have two throttles available to use for one on each engine. So I'll skip this little bit of taxiing and we'll look at the takeoff sequence. Alright, so taking off in the Junkers 88, supercharge is going to be left in auto, RPM will be maximum, flaps will be at the takeoff position of 25 degrees, and the cow shell is going to remain open. For technique, the airplane has a tendency to pull to the right at high power settings initially, so we want to increase the throttle only to 2000 RPM. Now once the aircraft begins to roll and we gain some ground speed, you'll increase the throttle to full power, and then you'll lower the nose of the yoke and rotate about 170, 180 kilometers per hour. We do this technique so you can maintain control in the roll, so if you needed to, you can use braking or differential power. So flaps, I'm going to set them to takeoff. I'm going to verify we have it, because we're going to look for that yellow light on that indicator panel down there. That tells us the flaps are in the start position. RPM is max, supercharge is in auto. So the airplane is set up, ready to go. We're going to try and take off through that clearing. It's going to cut power basically to the left engine. Let the right engine differential push the aircraft over to the left here. And as we start aligning where I want to go, increase the throttle again on the left engine to straighten myself out. Or maybe roll forward a couple of feet. Make sure the tail wheel is straight because we don't have a lock on this airplane. We'll come to a stop. Now remember what I said before is that this airplane does have a strong tendency to pull to the right if you was just to go to full power and take off. So this is just a technique. This will help you get it up in the air. We're going to increase the power to 2000 RPM. You can use a little bit of light braking to keep yourself straight if you need. Then once we get some ground speed, increase the throttle up to full. Now we've reached an airspeed where we can control our direction with the pedals. Push the yoke forward and lower the nose. Get the tail wheel off the ground. Accelerating to about 170 kilometers per hour. Pull back and we'll rotate. At the positive rate of climb, we're going to get the landing gear up. Now the landing gear can take a long time to get up to almost 28 seconds. So this little process is going to take a while. And once that gear is fully retracted, we're going to bring the flaps up and lower the nose. Again, accelerating. Your best climb speed is going to be about 250 kilometers per hour. And if you were going to maintain this climb power, it's going to be good for about 30 minutes if you're going to bring it back to 1.25 atmosphere at 2400 RPM. But I'm going to bring it back to cruise, which is going to be about 1.15 with 2250 on the RPM. And we're going to stay in the pattern as well, so making this left turn, we'll look at how to land the Junkers 88. So you get established on downwind, supercharge is going to be in auto. When you get your airspeed below 260 kilometers per hour, and you're going to set the flaps to the takeoff position of 25 degrees. And you'll start slowing down. You'll get to below 220 kilometers per hour, and you'll extend the landing gear. Remember, it does take a long time to get the gear fully extended or retracted, so keep that in mind and get it done early. So with the gear and the flaps in that configuration, you can make this base to final turn safely. You'll get the propeller out to maximum, and you'll need to maintain about 210 and 220 kilometers per hour in this turn. Then once you're established in the final, that's when I like to extend the flaps out to full. However, if you wanted to, you can get the flaps out to full a little bit earlier and still make that turn safely. It's just you're going to have a lot more drag involved, so you may need to carry a little bit more power in the turn if you do that. Alright, so we're established on downwind off this field on the left we took off from. So we are trying to slow ourselves down. We get below 260 kilometers per hour. That way we can extend the flaps out to the takeoff position. That's at 25 degrees initially. As we start slowing down, we'll get to 220 kilometers per hour. And the next step's going to be extending out the landing gear. And we can make that base the final turn now. Lowering the nose a bit. Just adjusting pitch and power so we can get ourselves to hold about 220 kilometers per hour in this turn while the landing gear is extending. Aiming point's going to be just the beginning of the field. You can have the flaps out all the way if you want during this turn, but I prefer to wait until you're established on final just due to the extra drag. So we get the flaps out all the way. Keep flying towards the aiming point, reducing the power. Then we can start increasing the back pressure a little bit. Slowing that descent right down. Hold up on 3-point attitude, cut the power, and we touch down. Full back pressure on the yoke. Getting the brakes going so we can start slowing down. As you slow down, you may pull one way or the other, so you can just use differential braking or power as needed to keep yourself straight. That'll complete the tutorial on the Junkers 88 C6. Till next time, remember to fly safe and check your 6.